Yes, we can hear.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Hi.
Hi.
Sorry, my internet is not very stable this afternoon. I'd like to welcome each one of us to this session. And I had just posted on the chat, if people could explain very briefly what their professional background is so that we can cater sufficiently for you, would appreciate that. I know we are targeting engineers, planners, but there could be other people, students. So just let us know so that we cater for you properly. Caro, if you could kindly just share the screen and provide the program for today. Thank you. Thank you. So today we'll look at demand assessment, service planning, and infrastructure sizing. And we did say that for this session, the workshop is focusing on BRT planning. Would love to tackle everything else, but it's not possible. After that presentation by Gabriel Gitawa and Reme, we'll have a Q&A. Today we'll have a break of 10 minutes, hopefully. And then we'll listen to Cairo's experience on their BRT corridor design. So it would be useful for you to capture some of the expected standards for designing, and then we compare what Cairo's experience has been like. At 4 o'clock, we are looking forward to having NaMATA again. Engineer Jonge is going to present to us NaMATA's infrastructure designs and service planning. And he's also going to give us a snippet of the implementation plan, timelines, and project financing. I believe this is for BRT line 2, but when we get to that, it will be clarified. Then we'll have another question and answer session. And after that, we'll have a wrap up. So that's what we are doing for this afternoon. And like I said, yesterday was very, very, very good, very interactive. I encourage you to put your concerns, your comments, your thoughts on the chat so that we'll address them during the Q&A. And if time allows, I'll give people time to speak to us. As usual, let's have our videos off and mute our mics so that we can have a very efficient transmission. I see people are still registering. And I think because we have some 4 minutes or so, according to the program, I'd just like to ask my friend Pierre. Yesterday, you promised us a document. I don't know if you were able to post it on the chat. I've just seen you, that's why I'm talking to you now.
Yes, yes, I am preparing it. I will finish it this afternoon after the meeting. Excuse me for the delay.
Thank you for that. We always look forward to new information and areas of sharing. Thank you, Pierre. We look forward to looking at your analysis to see what we can borrow. This afternoon, we have planner James Minor, and we agreed that what he did not present yesterday will be taken care of tomorrow during the TOD planning session. So we'll not miss out on the important slides that Planner Minor was to give us. So again, we are trying to include all the good stuff that's coming up. This being a training session, and I see most of the people are engineers, planners, and students, is very good. would encourage you to interact with the presenters, but it would be best to allow them to go through the presentation, and then you can raise your questions during the Q&A. If we start interrupting them, we may not get to the end of the presentations. I think I'll leave it there and hand it over to Gabriel from ITDP, who will also introduce to us the expert modeler. Here, this is the person who looks at all the modeling for BRT, for ITDP. So we do have the very best of experts in the house. So over to you, Gabriel, and take the time that is allotted to you on the program. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rehab, for the introduction. Yeah, my name is Gabriel Gitao, and I'll be taking you through the demand assessment presentation. And on board, we have a transport modeling consultant from Brazil. He's Remy, and he will take us through the modeling process and some of the case studies that he has undertaken. We've done so many projects in Nairobi. There's the Nairobi modeling. We've also done case studies in Mombasa. And Remy will be taking us through the modeling exercise. So just confirm if you can see my screen from your side.
Yes, if you could put it on full screen.
Okay, thank you. So I'll take you through the public transport demand assessment. This is the initial step that you take whenever you're doing your public transport planning. The demand assessment gives you an estimate, or you're able to determine, you're able to find out what is happening on the ground, the current trips which are being made. And I'll take you through the process of how you collect data, and our transport modeler who is going to take you through the modeling exercise. I'll give case studies from Nairobi. We did an exercise in Nairobi and also in Mombasa. So for Nairobi, we were lucky, we had the digital Matatu. This is an online platform which had all the existing Matatu routes. And this was the starting point of our data collection process. So the digital Matatu, it had given all the existing Matatu routes which are in operation in Nairobi. And this was the starting point of our data collection process. For the public transport demand assessment, there are various kinds of surveys which are conducted. We have the frequency occupancy survey. And this is a survey which is done to determine the frequency of buses or taxis, and in Nairobi, it's the frequency of matatus, which are applying the corridors, and you're also able to determine the occupancy of the passengers on each vehicle. We also have the boarding and lighting survey, and this is an onboard count of how many passengers get on and off the buses at each stop along the route. We also have the transfer surveys, and these are done to identify the trips which are made up of more than one segment. So these are the three kind of surveys which are very critical in public assessment of your public transport demand. For the case study for Nairobi, we conducted Nairobi, the NaMATA, in collaboration with ITDP, conducted the frequency occupancy surveys. We had 92 locations. We did the citywide F4 counts. We also did the citywide boarding and lighting surveys. The surveys were conducted on a total of 120 Matatu routes that are in operation. And for the transfer surveys, 4,600 interviews were completed during the public transport assessment. I'll take you deeply into how the surveys are conducted, and starting off on the frequency occupancy survey. This is a map which is showing the locations which are selected for Nairobi. The surveys were conducted in 2018, 2019. We had 92 locations, and these locations were based on the routes where the current Matatu operations are occurring at. So surveyors were positioned at these 92 locations, and they were capturing the data on the existing public transport routes. So you can see this photo is showing a photo, an example along Thika Road. These are one of the locations where the surveyors had been located and were capturing the data. So the frequency occupancy, the surveys were conducted during the morning and the evening peak period. That is from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. in the morning, and in the evening period, peak period, between 4 to 7. And the survey methodology, the surveyors were capturing the details of the public transport vehicles which are passing the count location. And for each vehicle that passed by, the surveyors would capture the vehicle type. They would also capture the origin and destination of these matatus. And for the case of Nairobi, we have some routes, we have the matatu, the route numbers or the circle name. So that was being captured in the survey. The surveyors would also do an approximate, they would count the number of passengers who are on board the matatus and do also record the time. So this is an example. This is the survey form that were used to capture the data. And you can see the vehicles were classified into vehicle type. We have different classifications of vehicles that operate in Nairobi. So this is an example of the different kind of vehicle types that were captured. We have the 14-seater. These are the most common vehicle types along in Nairobi. Then for other routes, like the Githurai route, we have the big buses, the 45-seater. We have that. So the vehicle classification was, we had the 14, 26, 33, 37, all the way up to 52 vehicle types. So the surveyors were capturing the data for each location. They would capture the vehicle type, the route name, or the circle name, and also the route number. So this is an example also of how the surveyors were positioned. They were capturing data in both directions. This is how you capture data. You capture data both in the inbound and the outbound location. So for each survey location, surveyors are positioned on both sides of the road, and they capture all the public transport data of the vehicles which are passing that survey location. For counting, how you count the passengers, you do a quick count on the number of passengers who are on board. And if most of the seats are empty, you just do a quick count of the number of passengers who are seated in the matatu. Then if most seats are full, you can count the empty seats and do a quick math and subtract from the total number of seats in the vehicle, and you'll be able to determine the number of passengers who are on board. Then if all the seats are full, sometimes you can have a corridor where we have even standing passengers. The way you obtain the occupancy is by counting the number of standing passengers, and then you add that to the total number of the vehicle capacity. So this is an output from the surveys after conducting this frequency occupancy. It gives you the existing public transport demand, and you're able to determine the number of passengers who are using the public transport vehicles along your corridor. So this is an example. This is the survey output from the frequency occupancy. This is along Thika Road. We had counts near Clayworks at Githurai. You can see the numbers were about 10,900. And as you go towards town, the figures are kept on coming up. Also, if you compare the inbound versus the outbound, this was the morning peak period. And you can see the survey output indicate that we had the inbound traffic was heavier compared to the outbound direction. This was another survey location at Roasters, also along Thika Road. We also had position surveyors near Allsops along Ring Road and at Drive-In. And this is the region, this is the area where we had the highest volume of observed passengers, where 26,600 passengers were observed during the morning peak period. That is during the peak hour in the morning. So as you can see, as the traffic keeps on coming towards town, our corridor, that is the Thika Road, has got a very high demand with passenger demand of up to 26,600 passengers. Moving on towards town, the numbers came down near Pangani and Muthaiga area. So if you compare between Muthaiga and Ngara area. The numbers came down at Pangani. This is because this area experiences a lot of traffic congestion. So the flow, the flow was not that high, and the surveyors would not capture so many occupants of the vehicles which were passing by. This is also the other results towards the CBD. You can see the numbers are also coming down. And this is near Ngara towards Globe Roundabout. And this is the traffic from Kipande Road, from Westlands. This is along University Way. And the numbers were coming down because inside in the CBD, there is total congestion and vehicles are not flowing. So the surveyors would not capture so many passengers on board. Once you've obtained the public transport volumes, that number, the passenger demand, can be used you can use that data to determine the frequency of buses if you want to introduce maybe a bus service. And the way you obtain the number of buses which would be required, it's based on the observed volume against the vehicle capacity. So for example, if you observed a volume of about 26,000, you'd be able to determine the frequency, how many buses would be required along that corridor. Assuming you have 120, the bus capacity of about 120 passengers per bus. So along that corridor, you'd require 217 buses per hour to handle this demand. The other comparison is the headway versus the frequency. And the frequency gives you the number of buses which are required per hour, and the headway gives you the interval at which these buses will be docking at your station. And the way you relate your headway against frequency, to determine headway, it's 60 minutes, in 1 hour has 60 minutes, divided by the bus frequency. So for example, if you have 216 buses passing a location in 1 hour, the interval at which these buses would be required to pass that point would have a headway of 0.3 minutes. The other data that you obtain from your surveys, it can be used to determine, you can be able to compute the width of your stations. And this is the formula which is used. You require 1 meter, 1 width is required to do your infrastructure. That is 0.5 meters for the wall and fixtures on either side. Then you also need to determine the width which is required for the waiting passengers who are waiting in the inbound direction, and also the width required for circulating passengers and another width for passengers in the opposite direction. So this is the formula that is used to compute the width of your station. These formulas are there during yesterday's presentation. Chris presented the NaMATA BRT framework. So these formulas are there, and they're also in the BRT planning guide. So we did an example of to determine the width requirement on one of the stations along Githurai. The proposal is to have a staggered station, and we found out that the frequency for any given time on one substop, you'd have about 95 passengers waiting between the bus interval. So the waiting time, they would require a width of 1.6 meters. Then the width for the circulating passengers would require 1.62 meters. But in the opposite direction, there will be no width requirement because the station is staggered. And with a staggered station, the docking, the boarding and alighting on your car on one area, on one side. So for the Githurai, the required width based on the existing demand along the corridor, you require a station which is 4.5 meters wide. The other survey which is conducted to determine the public transport demand assessment, we have the boarding and alighting survey. And these surveys, this is an onboard survey which is done to determine locations where people are boarding and alighting from. And I will take you through the survey methodology. We also conducted this survey, citywide survey in Nairobi and also in Mombasa. The survey method is we have surveyors are positioned that they sit at the door, near the door, and the surveys are done on board. So the surveyor sits near the door, and for every stop where the buses stop, the surveyor captures the number of passengers who are boarding, and also you capture the number of passengers who are alighting at that stop, and you also indicate the name of that stop. So this survey is done on boarded. You do a complete round trip from the point of origin to the point of destination. This is the format in which the surveyors were doing their data entry. So for the first stop, you count the number of passengers who board. You also count the number of passengers who alight at that point, and then you indicate the stop name. You repeat this for all the intermediate stops up to the last stop. So on the vehicle destination, the number of boardings would be 0. Then you capture the number of people who alight, and you also indicate the name of that stop location. So these are one complete round trip. It consists of complete inbound and outbound trips. So assuming, for example, if the trip is coming from Thika to Nairobi, a complete round trip would be from Thika all the way to Nairobi, and then also from Nairobi back to Thika. And these surveys was, we completed 5 round trips for each route in the CBD. So one complete round trip composes from the point of origin to destination, and also back to your point of origin. The data collection process, we're using GPS-enabled devices, and these are the applications which we use to capture data. We used locus maps for Android phones, and for iPhones, we're using My Maps. So these are free softwares. You can easily download them online, and you can use them to capture your data. So this is an example of how the surveyors were capturing, were able to pin down the waypoints along the survey route. So for each stop, for each location where the matatus were stopping, the surveyors would drop a pin, and you can be able to see where most boardings and alightings are taking place. This is the routes which were surveyed in Nairobi. We had a total of 120 routes which were surveyed, and they captured, they mapped out all the boarding and alighting locations in the entire city. The other survey which is conducted is the transfer surveys, and these are assuming we have someone who is coming from home and he needs to go to school. Mostly what happens, you find that there is always a transfer point. So the reason why we conduct these transfer surveys is you can be able to determine the locations where most transfers are occurring at. And also you can be able to introduce a direct service from the output of your service. And this will minimize the needs of that transfer. So by conducting the transfer surveys, you're able to know where people are coming from, where are they going, and you're also able to determine the transfer points along the road. This is the output from the transfer surveys in Nairobi. The output indicated that most people who are transferring along Thika Road, most of the trips are either headed to Westlands or Upper Hill. But currently we don't have those direct service, so there is a service which can be introduced, and it would minimize the needs of transfers in the CBD. Some of the challenges that were encountered during the data collection. Thika Road, it's one of the heaviest. The corridor has a very heavy traffic flow, and it was quite challenging when the surveyors were trying to capture all the vehicles which are passing the survey location and also determine the passengers on board. We also had passengers who were not willing to undertake the interviews during the boarding and alighting surveys. Security incidences. One of our surveyors was attacked when we were conducting, he was mugged when we were doing the surveys in Mombasa. We also experienced some hostile passengers, and they were giving some responses which were not valid. So those are some of the challenges that we faced when conducting these surveys. We also did the same public transport demand assessment in Mombasa. We had 39 locations for Mombasa. A total of 56 matatu routes were surveyed. And we also captured 2,135 interviews for Mombasa. So this is the positioning of the survey locations in Mombasa. They were evenly distributed in the island. We also had locations to the north of Mombasa, the west of Mombasa, and also the south of Mombasa. The survey output, these are the volumes, the passengers per hour per direction during the morning peak period. And we found out that the Nyali Bridge, across the Nyali Bridge channel, that is where we have the heaviest volume of traffic during the morning period. So most passengers, as this is the only access into the island from the north. We also had a high volume of passengers, about 4,800 from the ferry terminals. At the Causeway, the volume was about 3,100. And in the CBD, near Markiti area, the volume was about 5,700. We also conducted transfer surveys, and we have 5 major transfer points had been located in Mombasa. These are the locations where most passengers and pedestrians tend to make their transfers from. There was a station at Ferry, Posta, Mombetiari, Sabasaba, and also at Lights. The output from the transfer surveys in Mombasa, you were able to determine where most of where the trips are originating from. This is an output to the transfer surveys through Posta. So the green is the origin of the trips, and most people who were making transfers at the Posta, they were either headed to the ferry or towards docks, that is towards the port. Then we also had transfers at Lights. Most people were destined either towards Magongo area or towards Kongoya Market in Mombasa. Yeah, and that is how we conducted the traffic demand assessment. Now I'll invite our transport modeler, Remy, to take us through the service planning and how we do our infrastructure sizing. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Remy Jameret. I'm transport planner and modeler. So I work with ITDP in different places and here in Kenya. And we develop a methodology to be able to get a model through all those the data Gita presents. Because in a lot of places we don't have information that are available, like household survey, or in fact we don't have a matrix, okay? So OD matrix. So we develop a methodology to be able to generate a matrix based on those informations. And this process is very detailed and efficient because we are based on those survey. Basically, we are based on the boarding lighting survey, which is a survey very precise. We at the starting point, we don't use a specific zoning. We base the analysis on the stops where people board on the light, and then we can aggregate if we want later. But we got a very precise information because all is based on boarding and lighting. So what we do in this process is that we get from the boarding and lighting survey, we transform this information, in fact, to a matrix. So how do we do this? We get the boarding and lighting by direction for each route, and then we can transform this information as an OD for each route. It means we use a fratar and we distribute this those boarding and lighting. So it's the same that some survey are done with a ticket, you know, that you give at the boarding and the passenger give back at the when you light. So this is when you distribute, you get the same result as this kind of survey. And then we know exactly for each route, each direction, what is the route OD, okay? And then based on this, we generate first a matrix which is based on stops by routes. And then we introduce the transfer survey. So the transfer survey, of course, is useful to get a diagnostic in the city where the people transfer. It's also needed to be able to transform the stop-to-stop matrix to a real OD matrix, incorporating the data we can extract from the transfer survey from each route people are coming and which other route they use. So this allow us, what we do for each route. So we got the BA, okay, and we expand this boarding and lighting by the frequency of the route. And all this information is from the street. We use all information which is observed. So the frequency also is not the frequency which is defined in the table. This is really what is observed in the street. So we got, at the end of this process, we got a very precise matrix based on stops. So it's very detailed. And this is very useful also because when we got this precise location, it helps a lot also to define later where we should preferably implement some stations, because we got the movement of the passenger, So this is a very detailed information. And in fact, the problematic in all the project basically is the matrix. So is how to get a matrix of good quality. So this is always a problem, and a good matrix is a very high percentage of a good project, right? Because this is really the key information for the network. It's more easy because we know the routes. We representing the route system is something more easy than getting the OD. So we developed this methodology, and this methodology was used in a lot of places, not only here in Kenya. It was used in a lot of countries, and we had very good results with this method. It's also very useful because we can work where we don't have information. Okay, so we just need to do surveys, and we can generate matrix and get something very precise. And so this is a methodology that works well for years now. Okay, so this is a very important step in the project. Then once we estimate this matrix, so we do this work. We are working for the morning peak. Okay. In this method we concentrate on actual demand, because this is actual observed demand. And of course we can later on estimate some future demand based on socio-economic data and everything. In the beginning we don't work on this at first on the projections, because this is always something that there are a lot of hypotheses that can be taken. There are a lot of discussion of what will happen in the next 20 years and 30 years. Sometimes the people are not don't agree about the hypothesis of work, so we let this for later. And we use the actual data in the vision to, okay, let's solve the actual problems, okay? And of course, later on in the project, we need to have a financial analysis, and then we will need to introduce a year-by-year demand. So then we will need to, a minute. Then we will need to consider some hypotheses and work on a future demand, but this is not the goal by now. In fact, what we do is that we use the actual demand and we dimension the system with the actual demand based on actual numbers, and we include some reserve of capacity to be able to grow, okay, with normal growth. But so by now we didn't go through this exercise of estimating the future demand, which is an exercise we can do later and discuss with authorities also about all the hypotheses we can consider or not, okay? But by now, with actual demand, we are able to dimension the system and to propose, to recommend what we need based on the demand. So this is the step we do by now. Then with this, we introduce, when we got the matrix, we introduce the future network. So we propose some scenarios. Okay, so we have done Thika Road in Nairobi, where we work a lot in Thika Road in different configurations. We have a very high numbers of passengers in Thika. It's with the proposer, we are around the 30,000 ppHPD, so it's very huge corridor. So then, based on those numbers, with the modeling, we know all the boarding and lighting by station, the frequency of the different routes. We propose some different operational design for each situation. So we got, in the case of Thika Road, we simulate some express services. So we plan to do a BRT corridor with the passing lane on stations because of the very high volumes. And we got different kind of services which are express, and also we check some direct service to other parts which were identified in this transfer survey. So for example, in Thika we had a lot of trips in the AMP destination to Parklands and Upper Hill. So so we introduce different kind of, okay, Gita, I'm seeing now the screen here. So okay, those maps here. Okay, yeah, look, those maps here are where the boarding and lighting were observed. Okay, all this is introduced in the model. Okay, so this is the basic survey, the basic boarding and lighting survey that we expand. We expand this data with the frequency of each route direction. So this map here that you can see are the boarding and lighting that are directly extracted and expanded from the survey. Okay, so as I was telling you, you know, this is a very precise information. You got really the location where the people use the bus, which is very useful. So we can aggregate this later. Okay, this map here is another point which is very important is in the model is to define the speed, because this with the actual speed, of course, the speed at a map like this, for example, it's already a kind of diagnostic, all right, where the speed are very low. We can identify the worst place. Of course, the most benefit of the project will be where we got the lowest speed, okay, and this is also, the speed is also very important to estimate the benefit of the project, because this is at the end how we calculate the total time which is offering by the new project. We can compare with actual situation. So this information of speed is really crucial, and we got this information. It depends, but for example, we can get this from GPS, and this is also a very precise information, link by direction. Okay, this is we cannot use in a model a global speed or something like this. It's really it doesn't work. So this is really precise. And another way to obtain this information, if we don't have some GPS data, is for example with the boarding and lighting survey, we can register the time. Okay, so we are able based on the boarding and lighting survey to also calculate the speed along the itinerary of each route. So this is a survey we got different way to obtain, and that we need also something very precise. So after all this, we of course we do the calibration for the current scenario, okay, where we compare the number of passengers on all the principal roads with the model passenger. We adjust this model to calibrate it to represent the actual situation. Then we can model and test some different scenarios for the future. Okay. So I think that this is a calibration. Okay, so this is a proposal for Thika Road, where you see we had like 34,000 ppHPD. It's very high. Also here we join different routes from different neighborhood to run along Thika. So of course it increased the number of passengers compared to the current situation. We proposed different routes, and these are the routes. You see all this neighborhood. We take some passenger for different places where actually they maybe have another option to reach the downtown. Okay, so this generates those volumes. Once we got the volume of the infrastructure of the proposed BRT, we can, in fact, we dimension the system based on those results. So of course, the dimensioning of the system depends on what kind of operational design we propose. Okay. So this is an example of routes that is proposed for the BRT. Okay, fleet size, frequency. We got in this example here, we got maybe 12 routes or something like this around Thika Road. So this is another one. You know, so each the triangles are boarding and lighting. So This information is used at the end, the boarding lighting for each station to dimension the station. So Gita told you about the dimensioning of the station for the height of the station. But here we're talking about how many substops we need, what is the configuration, if we need, what is the saturation at the station, and if we need overpassing lane or not. So we had discussion recently with different people about Thika Road, about the project we need to implement there, because based on all the simulation we had and all different scenarios we could run, one thing that really is the conclusion is that the volume there really need a BRT with very high capacity, and it is we really need to have overpassing lane and an infrastructure which allows to grow and to also to develop the system in different direction in the future, to join with other corridor and really incorporate Thika Road in a network. Okay, so this slide here is about the design. So of course we got different ways. Okay, we got the trunk and feeder way, which is what it's. I mean, it was used a lot, and it is still used, because in fact in the BRT system you got a lot of consideration to take in account. So some places like in Bogota, in Transmilenio, you got it's a trunk and feeder service. And I mean, it changed a little bit now, but basically you got a lot of hills with favelas and neighborhood which are impossible to reach with articulated bus. So of course some places you got naturally a trunk and feeder, because you don't have conditions to be able to run a bus around those places. But in other cases, like in Nairobi, you get options to have direct service, so which means you got a bus with doors on both sides and you can run inside and outside the corridor. This had a very big advantage for the system, because of course we reduce the transfer and we got a better time saving for the passengers. So of course, if we can do direct service, it is recommended. So this is the case here in Nairobi and also in Mombasa, where we got only direct service. Okay, we don't have trunk and feeder in this situation here. So what we have done for the routes that were proposed is basically we based this analysis on existing routes. So in fact, we join some existing routes or we extend some of them, but we use actual route in the different neighborhood. Here you can see Muiki, Zimmerman, all those are existing roads actually. And so we keep those itineraries of existing routes and we include them in the BRT lane. So and we had also here from direct service also crossing downtown. So yeah, we got 12 routes that system. So this is a photo of Bogota in left. So you see, this is a kind of configuration. This is also in Bogota. This is the north part, where this is a kind of expressway, also a little configuration that it can be compared with what we have on Thika Road. Yeah, it's a very comparable situation. So then in Bogota it's a little specific case, because in fact we got passing lane all along the way, okay, which is not needed for Nairobi, but we definitely need passing lane at stations and several sub-stops. So, you know, for this project, we estimate dimensioning for stations, you see. So this is a scheme for high-demand stations, where it explains how the bus are stopping, and so here in each stop you can stop 2 buses, and this way to keep 2 buses at each stop allows you to increase a lot the capacity, in fact around 40% based on if you have only 1 location per stop. And what we need to define is how many stop we need. So this is Dar es Salaam. Okay, we also work with ITDP for the BRT in Dar es Salaam. So we have done a model also there, which was not exactly the same methodology, because in Dar es Salaam, the way to create the matrix was based on an onboard survey. So it was an onboard survey which include already the transfers. Okay, so it was a little bit different, but it was also good matrix that we have there. And in Dar, it's the same situation. We have overpassing lane in each station. Okay, unless in downtown we got a lot of restriction, so we don't. But globally, everywhere we got passing lanes. So this is something that we estimate directly from the model. So the saturation that we use to estimate the number of substops is 40%. This is based on observation, and basically this was observed and defined after Bogota was implemented, and then confirmed in a lot of different other BRT around the world. So this is saturation which you need to use to dimension. You need to dimension at low saturation to be able to take into account all the irregularities that you have, you can have in a very concentrated peak. Okay, so the dimensioning need to be made at low saturation of 40%, and then okay, in this table we see how we calculate those the dimensioning. So all this is extracted directly from the model. This is information that that is output from the model. So we got boarding and lighting inbound and outbound each direction. Then we got the frequency of the buses. So we define also for the routes which type of bus we need. Okay, and then we calculate the saturation, which is based on number of boarding and lighting and frequency at stops, at stations. And for each saturation, we calculate how many sub-stop we need at the end. So, you know, this is something we developed for a long time, and this is very precise, and it's you know, these are conclusion of project. You know, when we do all this process, we can affirm, okay, here we need a very high number of sub-stops. For example, here you can see that in downtown we got 2 stations with 3 sub-stops. It's quite big. Downtown is very heavy, and you know, this is a 3 sub-stop, but we are considering Thika Road only in this simulation. In fact, you know, downtown, there is a specific project to do, because all the lines are concentrating downtown. And if we incorporate different other corridors, and if we propose a global plan, or we add different corridor to create a network, of course this figure will change. Okay, so this is I mean, this is okay for Thika Road. We can consider that we got the right dimensioning. For downtown, this is the dimensioning which is according to the demand on Thika Road, okay, which does not include all the routes and all the corridors. So this is something, of course, which will evaluate in downtown. We can see that we will need to split different stations. And the photo you had at the beginning of the seminar was rendering from Nairobi, right, with the BRT station in the middle. So this we need to study precisely with all the corridors. What is the final dimensioning we need? Of course, downtown is a problem which is complex, but we already reached some solution, and we can split some station, and we can implement the system to be able to get this capacity. So okay, so this is the cross section in Thika Road. What is proposed? So you see the way we can reduce the dimension for the BRT is to the off station. We don't have a specific problem. We got one lane by direction, and for the stations we can split the stations so that we can have only 3 lanes in spite of 4 lanes. Okay. So we can win some space in this situation. You see, if this is okay, in my avenue where we got space. So here we got a central station with 2 lanes on each side. Okay. And in Thika Road, we got some stations which are split, and we got only 3 lanes. So we always, depending on the demand and the numbers we have and the conditions in situation, we always try to find which is the solution that we can, which best correspond to the demand and the local conditions. So if we need to split station in lot of place, we got this configuration here with 2 lanes one direction and 1 lane in the reverse direction, which allow us to implement a BRT with high capacity, and we can reduce the dimension of the infrastructure to allow the other lanes for cars and general traffic. So
okay, Remy, we are running out of time. If you could
okay,
summarize,
fine.
please.
Yes, so that's all the process we have done. What I want to say is something that in fact now, you know, this is to build this this model and this database. Okay, it takes time, but once you have done it, which is the case now, in fact, you can simulate a lot of things, whatever you want. So we have done some different exercise in Nairobi, for example, with other corridor with Juja Road, and we have done some other simulation based on proposals that were done, like the Matatu ban on the city center. So we have done different exercise and different simulation because we got a model which is totally ready, and we can run every corridor everywhere in the city. So this is now, once it's done, very useful, because very quickly we can get answer, you know, like, let's do the Matatu ban. Maybe that's not the idea. Is that what should we do? So what should we test? We can test a lot of different scenarios and compare and really decide which one is the best. So that's the exercise we need to do now, and we got now everything ready to do this. So that's now the interesting part. That's it. So here you can see this is an example of Juja Road, right, with a proposed BRT, an estimation here for this corridor. So this can be done for all the city. Okay, so and these are some results, okay, of the model on Thika and Juja. So that's it. That was that is what we got for for the modeling. Thank you.
Thank you, Remy. Thank you, Gabriel. Like I said, this is going into depth, and I'm hearing them say that they have all the simulations for the whole city, but I'm sure government is not prepared to work with the whole city. I think we are doing a level of piloting and experimenting, beginning with BRT line 2, but that was indeed very, very informative. I'm sure we have some questions that people have raised that I'd like you to dive into immediately. So if Gabriel can start us off, and maybe my first one, given that your modeling was done on the corridor Thika Road, and you've recommended a certain level of service with, I think, about over 100 buses, if I'm not wrong. If government is not able to implement it at full scale, how can we address it incrementally and still get the full scope of the desired standard of the BRT system?
You know, the important thing, I think, is the infrastructure, because, you know, in different places, when we discuss this, we always say, let's do only one lane and one station without passing lane, and we will do some regulation or something like this, which was some proposal what were done for Juja Road. You know, if you have a system like this with one lane, and you are blocked, you cannot design the routes. In fact, you are obliged to use one single service, stopping everywhere. So you don't have possibilities to change, to grow, and to find the best solution. So in fact, what is very important is to concentrate that need to be built, that these infrastructures allows you to be able to change in the future, adapt, propose other service linked to other corridors. And so you are not blocked in one you need to follow for the rest of the life of the system. So, you know, if we get only one lane, we will have one route or something stopping, you know, like this is a kind of concept like a tramway, like a LRT, or, you know, this is not exactly the concept of the BRT, which is you got a lot of options and you can do everything. So I think the important thing in this case is really to convince that we need an infrastructure for this system, because we are carrying, this is 30,000 ppHPD, this is very high. We need an infrastructure for this demand. Okay, then the operational design exactly in detail, what we're going to do. We can study before opening, and we can do a more detailed study. Okay, but the important thing is to convince for the infrastructure, to let the space to get the infrastructure that we need for that kind of demand.
Thank you. Gabriel, could you please take up some of the issues on the chat?
Yeah, thank you, Rahel. I can see some question on there's one question which is asking when we conducted the boarding and alighting surveys. These surveys were done during the morning peak period between from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. because this is a period when we experience the heaviest congestion, and we wanted to determine the average vehicle speeds during this period. So the boarding and alighting surveys were conducted in the morning, and the 5 round trips were all conducted. So whenever it got past 10 a.m. in the morning, the surveyors would terminate their trips and they would continue with the surveys the following day in the morning. I'm looking at the charts also.
So I had asked a question which comes up in many forums. Are the routes that you have identified through your initial presentation of the Matatu routes, are these routes already adopted by the Nairobi County and NaMATA, so that we are not also planning for people who may not accept what we are finding on the ground?
So So based on our modeling, our proposal was to have convert the current Matatu routes into the BRT routes. And this would be provided in the form of, we would have the direct services, which would minimize the needs of transfers. And these are a response we can get more input, maybe from someone from NaMATA, from the operation B2, of the exercise on what NaMATA is proposing to do with the corridor, because currently they are doing the pilot project along Thika Road. So our modeling exercise and our results indicated that the best viable solution would to have the direct services. We had we proposed 12 services along the corridor that is along Thika Road. And so if you are someone from NaMATA, we can give some more input on what they plan to do with the operations on the BRT.
I see an engineer Chore from NaMATA. Would you have any response? Winnie? I don't know if Winnie is with us or if she's able to connect.
Lab, yes, we have adopted most of the recommendations, and as we are going to see on the presentation by Engineer Jonge, we are going to see what we have been able to take, but the basis of the implementation is on what GitHub had presented. So we have carried out mostly on that recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Maina. So have you seen any other questions, Gabriel, that are directed at you? Might we do a survey on the floating bridge at Baraki, Mtongwe?
There is a comment from Vipul from Mombasa. Yeah, you know, there is currently pedestrians are using the new floating bridge in Mombasa. And when we were doing our surveys in 2019, the bridge had not been constructed. So that is something we can follow up with the team in Mombasa.
There's a question from Ken Kunyiha. The first and last mile connectivity is an issue that hinders ultimate efficiency of BRT systems in various cities. Are there plans to bridge the last mile gaps in relation to the Nairobi BRT system?
The last mile connectivity, as we are all aware, all our trips begin and end by walking. And one thing that is very critical is to have this integration of the BRT. You should not only provide the BRT infrastructure, but you also need to make improvements in the NMT facilities, because once people get off board the system in the CBD, they will obviously walk to their places of destination. Something else that can be adopted for the last mile connectivity, you can introduce the BRT system. And we hope that the construction, the ongoing project, the BRT project, is going to incorporate the NMT facilities in the implementation of the infrastructure in the CBD and also along the corridor.
To plan a minor, are there plans to integrate BRT with the existing commuter rail station? And I think this refers to the central station in CBD.
Yes, we will be having a station at a station to integrate BRT on line 3 at the central station. We are almost going to the site. We should be going to the site in the course of the month of May. We are also having another integration station at Loiro. So yes, we have those intentions. Indeed, if it's possible, we would also want to integrate the IT system on fare charging between the train, the commuter train, and the BRT system. We are still working on that. Thank you.
Thank you. I see another interesting one that's looking at the integration of the matatus. Kenya Bus Service came and it collapsed. Now we have matatus that have continued providing the service. And if BRT is the thing we are contemplating, how do we properly diagnose the problem so that we don't lose out on the service that the matatus are providing? I think we can touch on this. Tomorrow's presentation by Engineer Jerry should also provide us with more insights on this. But I don't know who wants to take this one on, integrating the matatus.
Yes.
Is
Yes,
there a policy to support this?
Okay, we are already in discussions with the matatu operators right now. We have moved quite a bit of, covered a bit of length, and there'll be part and parcel of the BRT operating. I mean, there'll be part of the team that will be operating the BRT. So they're already in. Indeed, the station at Kasarani, we also have matatu bringing in passengers from other corners. So yes, that integration is there, and we shall be able to operate together hand in hand, because BRT, the 5 BRT lines finally may not be able to cover the whole part of the city. There will be other businesses that will be conducted by the matatus as well. But ideally, the buses, they may have to change the buses or the matatu buses with the time. Of course, to make the experience of using BRT more comfortable.
Thank you. Another one to you, Maina. You seem to be the one who will stand in.
Yes, Lahab. And
sorry, Gabriel, did you want to intervene?
No, just go ahead. Just go ahead, please.
Yes, Maina, there is a specific question to NaMATA. Given the high demand on line 2, and given what Remy and Gabriel have presented, will the infrastructure designs include passing lanes on BRT line 2?
Okay, Lahab. What we are doing with line 2 is a pilot project.
Yeah, but the person asking the question then seems not to know what the designs are.
The construction. So one that we have reduced is the passing lane.
By reducing, you mean you have omitted it?
Yes,
Sorry.
we have omitted the passing lane. That's what I mean. Yeah.
Because of space.
On this pilot one, we have reduced and omitted the passing lane. The costs were becoming too high and probably not able to use that. So we took the funds that were available, and what we found can be done is eliminating the passing lane.
Okay, my understanding then is that BRT line 2 is extremely experimental. It's based on what you can afford, not what the efficiency of the system will provide. Is that a fair statement at this point in time?
As I have said, Lahab, this is our first pilot project that will guide us even on how we'll be conducting the rest of the lines. And you know, there is quite a lot of work to do, including to work with the players in the industry. And we found this could be the best alternative for us to work out. In any case, we still hope to introduce a service line may not be very difficult when we come to that. So yes, we are piloting.
Okay, I hope that satisfies people who have been curious on the level of design for BR2 Line 2. You had already mentioned that you are working with the matatu industry, especially around Kasarani. Will the PSV operators become the providers and connectors of passengers from Mweki, for example, to the BRT? Or what is the interaction that NaMATA hopes to have with these people, specifically for Line 2?
Yes, Lahab, we will have a feeder station and the garage for the station. So the matatus will be acting as the feeder buses for the BRT. And beyond that also, the Matatu Association, we have formed them into, they have organized themselves into an association. And that association will also be involved in learning of the BRT.
So the whole system will be run by an organized Matatu Service Operators Company or whatever, for lack of a name. I'm just giving it for this purpose. That is what government is doing, trying to organize them into a viable business entity that can do the operations. Then the other question is, who will own the rolling stock? We assume, I think in the Integrated National Transport Policy, there was a mention of 64 buses that government is going to procure, whether they are 64 or 164 or whatever it is. Who will own the rolling stock, asks one of the people. Is it NaMATA? Is it the PSV operators themselves?
Lahab, as early as today in the morning, those are the discussions we are having. They are very high level. So at the moment, I may not give a commitment on it. We had a high level meeting today, and the discussions are basically on that and how we can go on. I mean, how we shall be able to get the loading stock. So that will be determined depending on the resources available and the process of acquiring the new stock. So yes, that's something that I will not be able to disclose at the moment.
Thank you. Final one for you. Will the Matatu feeder buses have the same cashless ticketing system as the BRT and commuter trains? This has to do with fare integration. Has that been thought through, and what is the expectation?
The total integration will be between the BRT bus and the commuter train. However, the matatus at the moment, because even in terms of standard, the matatus are not the same standard with the BRT. Our future looks that yes, it will be integrated in the future when the matatu investors will be in a position to exit their current matatu buses with the feeder buses as per the standard. So currently, the pilot line may not run with 100% integration. The integration level will be the matatu giving the BRT bus the passengers. So that may not be there as and when we would want to run the BRT buses. The only item I can say at this moment is that all systems are working towards having the BRT bus running by February of next year.
February of 2022?
Sure.
Okay, so the procurement must be underway if it's February. But you said that's something that's been discussed at high level. Another one that has just come in, the proposed Thika Road BRT may not address all the transport, the public transport demand along the corridor. Shall we still have matatus operating parallel to the BRT?
National consumers will not be able to use the same buses. And national investors will not be able to do the same, because you definitely cannot use your matatu to land passenger on the same route when you have a bus that is taking 30 minutes to arrive in town and you are taking 2 hours. So, we are taking 2 lanes. So it means the corridor will be constrained in terms of traffic by the general traffic. And since this will be a dedicated line, the route taken by the industry users is that they withdraw their matatu buses from running parallel with the BRT bus. However, there are no legal constraints demanding that they should not.
This is Honorable Mary Aribiza from Nairobi County Assembly. I am concerned about we trying to, not because I'm against matatus, I take them quite often. Even when I'm Mheshimiwa, I take public means quite often. But I have a problem with the culture that has been developed. And we know, as somebody has already mentioned, the fact that we tried to bring in National Youth Service, we tried to bring in KBS, the new KBS, and they failed. And the reason for failing, we must examine it ourselves. Is people getting in and running it down? What are the measures that are in place that this BRT that we are bringing in will not just be watered down? Because I'm told that people make sure, they even fundraise to make sure they infiltrate the organization in order to run it down. Because while matatus have served their purposes, we cannot go on with it in the current structure of which it operates. That's one. Secondly, we have also a culture of people not obeying rules on the roads. For instance, I think there was even a red line that was drawn on the Thika Road highway. And nobody really seemed to think that the vehicles that are going slower should be on that side, because that time it was not BRT. What are we going to make sure there is a barrier between the BRT and the other vehicles that are using the same road? Because if we mix them, we will just have Kenyans playing around and getting into BRT. If you look at BRT, and I've been to Ethiopia and Dar es Salaam, there is no vehicle that is allowed in here where the BRT is concerned. So I think any engineer can answer me, but it's just a concern that we must, and it must be institutionalized, an institution that will really work professionally in order for the BRT to go on. Otherwise, it will be run down and it will just fail like any other. Thank you.
Thank you, Mheshimiwa, for those comments. Is there an engineer who would like to respond as she requested? But my understanding of bus rapid transit lane is that it's exclusively for those buses. Then yesterday we had a presentation from Ethiopia, and as far as I know, they do not have a BRT corridor yet, but maybe I'm behind. But I want to give an engineer an opportunity to respond to
I am, Madam, I am aware, Madam Moderator, I'm aware that BRT is for special buses. What I'm saying is our behavior as Kenyans. We don't follow rules. Are we going to put a barrier between the lane for the BRT and the rest of the vehicles? Because it seems like we will use the same road. So it doesn't mean that I'm not in the picture of what a BRT is.
Okay, James Minor wants to respond.
Let me respond quickly. When I was answering again previously I said this would be purely dedicated for the bus, and there will be a complete segregation between the general traffic and the BRT bus. So in terms of our behavior patterns, we have studied our behavior patterns, and we are putting mechanisms and physical barriers to ensure that where the line is completely dedicated, it is impossible for any other vehicles to use the dedicated lanes. Regarding on operations, yes, we have put institutional frameworks to prevent such occasions that these will fall. And again, we are using the best international standard. We will not learn these like KBS was learned. These will be learned at various levels, with the regulator being NaMATA, and we also have another level of operators who will be released on the line to operate. Again, we are using the best practices over the world, so we are very unlikely to fall into that trap. And we have studied that history, and we are working towards not getting there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mheshimiwa Mary and James Maina. Like James had said, this is an ongoing process. It's a learning curve. We will make our mistakes, but we'll get there. Allow me to address Kevin Rotich and say that your questions around land value capture will be addressed tomorrow. If you could kindly pack them for tomorrow, and I'm sure Penina has picked them up, because you're asking James Maina about land rates in Nairobi and how this will change once the BRT is there. Is Nairobi County going to increase the land rates in areas that have seen improved infrastructural development, such as BRT? And what metrics can be used to calculate land rate increments in such areas? Can we allow James to digest this question, because you'll also be part of the panel tomorrow, kindly? Kevin, I hope that's okay with you.
Thank you, Lehab. The issue of land value capture is not something that has been practiced here in Kenya, so I don't want to digress so much into that. Being a new paradigm on social revenue for county governments, and probably something that can be used to fund BRT buses. To fund BRT operations. Basically, operations of BRT are never, very profitable. So again, this is something that, as I said, we are piloting. It is something that we also look into opportunities. We are also working with ITDP, and we also bring other players to see what benefits we can gain, if any, from the area of land value capture. In terms of rating system is something that is already very clearly defined in Kenya. But in terms of rate correction, most of the county government corrects less than 30% of what they are ought to collect. So the regulation for RAD rates is in the Rating Act Cap 287 and Cap 266, and that's where the details is explained. But these cannot be done because we are brought in BRT buses, because land rates in Kenya is based on undeveloped site value. So it doesn't capture the new values that are likely to be there after the increment that can be experienced by investing in BRT. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. That's very comprehensive. One that is gaining currency is about formalizing the matatu workers and getting them into employment contracts so that we remove and reduce the informality. Are there plans to integrate the matatu workers into the BRT? MATA's employment contracts? Or are they just going to feed passengers to the BRT buses and then they continue with their own informality?
But I think this discussion is showing how huge this industry is. And that's why, as NaMATA and the national government, we have decided we do a pilot line so that we can be able to experiment on some of these items. The industry is quite big. It has its own challenges, like you have mentioned, and we cannot be able to handle all of them at one time. We may shock ourselves if we do that at our go. We'll be doing bit by bit, but that is the future.
Thank you. I think that's a very reasonable answer, Mr. Maina. On the floor, do we have any other issue that you feel NaMATA and the presenters for this part of the day should tackle? Either raise your hand or just take on the mic. Thank you.
Could I? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
This is not in my capacity as an EIB employee, rather as a Kenyan citizen. I'm worried about the concept of funding BRT from land rates. That is an opportunistic approach which risks pushing the country into a renter economy, an economy where those who have assets extract value from those who do not have. The job of a city, of government, is to provide services. And ideally, it should extract value from the services it provides. So a city should charge people for collecting refuse, should charge people for sewage, should charge people for providing water. But it cannot charge people for simply owning property in the city. There should be an element of that. But it cannot be the core issue, the core way the city collects its revenue. So a BRT should collect its revenue from providing transport services. Of course, you can exploit this by renting out shops next to the BRT or land next to the BRT. But you can't simply drive a BRT through Ruiru and all of a sudden tell everyone in Ruiru, there goes your land charges, pay me more. That is not the purpose of government. And I believe if we go this way, we'll run the risk of going to a renter economy, an economy where those who have assets extract value from those who do not have, simply because they have the assets.
Thank you, Mr. Makoriwa. Well put. Again, it's out there for debate. And I want to push that issue to tomorrow's session, but it's something to think about. Can the BRT pay for itself? That's what you're asking. In other words, should we punish landowners just because there's an infrastructural development along where they own property? Good questions, good for discussion. Any other point that a participant feels they would like to raise that has not been captured and covered? You have the floor.
Good afternoon. My name is Constant Cap, urban planner based in Nairobi. Just a quick question, maybe for NaMATA. This week we've seen the piloting of Green Park terminus by Nairobi Metropolitan Services NMS, and during one of the tours we realized that the BRT will pass right outside Green Park station, which is basically Haile Selassie Avenue, and there seemed to be no plan towards to be a bit of disintegration between what NMS is doing and what NaMATA is doing. Has there been any progress towards having some synchrony there? Because with the new public transport terminal that NMS is developing, the BRT offers also an opportunity towards linking them through the central business district and across different parts of the city.
Thank you. Do we have NMS here, or is it back to James Minor for NaMATA? Is there a linking?
No,
I think that's his
NMS is
question.
not here. The simplest thing I can say is that these are not loan ledger work. They are all works that are being synchronized together. It's only that it's happening piece by piece, but all of them is a piece of the bigger picture. So what NMS is doing, including the green park, including the walkways, they are all related to what NaMATA is doing. And the bigger picture is to have all the 5 BRT lines, all 4 will be passing through the CBD, and only line 5 that will not be, which is a connector between line 2 and line 3 and line 1. So they are not loan ledger, we are working together.
Thank you. Michael Kihato, how are you? Please raise your concern.
I'm very fine. How are you, Rahab?
Doing well, thank you.
Yeah, it was just a small comment, and perhaps I've heard that the conversation will go on until tomorrow. It was with regard to the value capture, and Collins, my colleague, was saying that a colleague who we work with quite a lot was saying that it's a punitive cost to a property owner, and it isn't, because land value capture is capturing the appreciated value on the land, not a punitive cost on the owner of the land. But I think we'll have a much more extensive conversation about this tomorrow, perhaps.
Thank you. This seems to generate a lot of interest. So let's plug in tomorrow so that we unbundle that land value capture issue as we discussed TOD. One more before we take a break, particularly anything to do with NaMATA, planning BRT line 2. I'm informed that Engineer Jonge will not be available for his session. So if we had anything around implementing BRT line 2, or based on the simulation that ITDP has presented on BRT planning across the city, if you have any additional question, please raise it so that we take a 10-minute break and then listen to Cairo. Thank you. Bernard Bogwa, please go ahead.
Hi, this is my question in relation to what's the public perceptions of BRT? Because I'm not in the country at the moment, but most people I talk to back home either have very little idea or are against it. So is there a poll that's been taken pre-COVID to see the public perception? Because as transport planners, if our clients are the public, if they don't take up the proposals we're asking them to take up, the project might not succeed. So what's the public feeling around the BRT?
Thank you, Bernard. That's also a very useful question. As far as I know, through the BRT planning guide, there's a chapter on communication and communication strategy. For Nairobi, unfortunately, we popularized the BRT by painting Thika Road. And that has already created a lot of mistrust, disgust in some circles. And we've not carried a poll, a recent one. I'm sure as soon as the construction begins, and as Maina tells us, by February, the president, I believe, will be launching BRT line 2. Between now and then, a lot of public participation, communication would be expected from NaMATA. But I'm not sure if that is on the front burner or at the back burner. So back to you, Maina. You seem to be the NaMATA representative on this call. Could you help answer Bernard Bogwa's question? I answered a bit of it because I have had in some forum some of that annoyance and disgust. but you may have some hope for us. Thanks.
Okay, Lahab, yes, I agree with the statement, but this is a statement that you have taken into consideration. From a general perspective is that the citizens are equally tired that you are coming from, say, Nyeri, you take 1 hour to get to Githurai, then from Githurai to the city center, you take 2 hours. Basically, BRT is a professional area, and public transport in terms of MRTS is also a heavily professional area. So people just want a solution. And the solution is what we are providing. So in terms of this, we started working with the operators. At first, they were in war with us. We have been working with them for over 2 years now. And they are very enthusiastic of this one. And we are working together, and they are telling us this is the solution, and they have been waiting for all their lives. Because on the other hand, they are telling us their business is Matatu business is no longer profitable because they do one trip in the morning and one trip in the evening. To do another trip in between is almost impossible, and you have to run your bus without enough passengers. So yes, these are the inconveniences now the users have been experiencing, that they are having an erratic mode of transport, and this has seen the resultant factor of the car ownership increasing, and thereby locking down all our road network system. So having deliberated on the professional aspect of it and scientifically analyzing how this can be done, now our next aspect will be now on educating the members of the public, the users, on the solutions that is being provided. And this will be done. We have a whole section of communication, and we are working with the European Union on this one and NTU to educate the members of the public on this aspect. Before the line is rolled off in February, there will be a lot of communication and a lot of public participation on this one. You'll be seeing it very soon in various communication networks. Again, it will not be good to roll over the communication fast before something is done. Definitely with the station coming out, with all the other station coming up, people would want now to know what is happening and how is it going to sort their transportation problem. So the solution is there, and people will be educated diligently on how these will be changed and influence their lives for the better.
Thank you.
And
We are
can I
looking
add
forward to
something?
that.
Can I add something on what the engineer has said? As a Nairobi representative leader and a member of the Transport and Infrastructure Committee, I think it is quite preemptive for us to use social media, which has been infiltrated by people who, just because something is not suiting them, they go into social media. What I know is one thing: if this BRT will be able to make Nairobians to come from one part of the city within the shortest time, let's say 10 minutes or 15 minutes, when they know very well it takes maybe 1 hour or 2 hours or so, it will not be a big issue for Nairobians to do, as long as it is well implemented. Number two, it is well managed. Number three, the fare will be reasonable. It will be a very good welcome. So I think my brother from outside the country, just be wary. We have a lot of haters on media who just go in for the sake of, because it's not working for them. So I think it's a good thing. Let's give it a thumbs up. Let's have people travel from one part of the city to the other without coming into the city and staying there for very many hours, because it has been very frustrating. And that way, it's one way of being able to decongest the city, because this city, as the engineer has said, we have very many people who have reverted back to their private vehicles. And it's because you just realize it's impossible for you. With your private vehicle, you can maneuver through other streets in the backyard and be able to reach where you're going than the public transport. But once the public transport is there and it's following the route, it's following time, and it's reasonable at payment, and it is a good, comfortable means of transport, very many Kenyans will go for it. I don't think even we need a lot of, Nairobians will be very happy. We don't need a lot of education on that. What we need is to make sure we implement it well, we make sure it is working very well, and we make sure the behavior of the that has embedded our public transport, especially through the bad part of the matatu culture, is not brought on board again. Nairobians will be in it. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable. Catherine, are you still on board?
Yes, I am, and I'm happy to hear what Planner James Maina has said, because I think the issue is not that people are against the BRT at all. It is just that lack of knowledge. Like someone said, you paint the lines and Nairobians are wondering, what is the line about? Like now I use Thika Road a lot, and there's this construction going on everywhere, and people are wondering, what are these? What is happening? I think that the communication strategy is the issue. And as James has told us, it will happen at the right time. But maybe the right time should also be in the beginning. Let everybody know what is happening. I don't think anyone is really against the policy of the BRT. And I think, as the Honorable is telling us, everyone would be very happy to decongest and to get to town on time. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. I think there was a question on financing being put here. How are you financing Thika Road? I think it's a government-funded project, but the question being asked, has government approached development banks like in other countries to finance BRT line 2 so that we have a high standard BRT project? Maina, please.
Lahab, what I can say is that the pilot project is financed by the government of the Republic of Kenya directly. So this one is not co-financed with any development partner. However, all the other lines, each and every line has a development partner that has an interest. We are working with European Union on line 3. We are working with the government of Korea with line 5. Line 1, we are already working between the government somewhere along the way. It is going to be constructed as within the program of the construction of the highway. So it is part of that construction. Then the African Development Bank is interested also with line 2. So all the lines, but it has been very slow. Line 2 has been very slow.
Okay.
So no, not line 2. Yep. So basically, we do expect by 2025 all the lines will be up and running.
Okay, one final one. Kindly shed some light on the NaMATA bill. What is the current status? Did it go through Parliament? Is it still pending? I think that will be the final one for you for now.
Thank you, Lahab. The constitution of NaMATA currently is through an executive order. So after the executive order, the matter went to Parliament as a bill to be enacted as law. However, again, we hit a snag on the discussion at the Transport Committee. There were some issues that we wanted clarified, so it never went through Parliament as a law. So, and you know, there are procedural processes in Parliament. I think after bill is tabled, some issues are asked for clarification. It is taken back to us. It takes some time. So we are on that back and forth between the executive and the parliament. And of course, on the other hand, the judiciary to advise us on, not judiciary, the AG to advise us on the processes. So that's where we are. And if the hope of time, we'll still be able to go through and have the NaMATA bill passed by parliament.
Thank you very much, Planner Maina. You've tried to educate us on where NaMATA is at, what NaMATA is doing. We know it's not a very easy process. And I'd like us to take a 10-minute break, but before we do that, I'm giving Kazim Sanusi from Abuja, Nigeria, 2 minutes. He says, or she says, that can I give some comforting words on the issues that are being raised? Kazim, you have the space. If you exceed 2 minutes, I'll mute you. Karibu. Kazim? I'm just seeing systems and cities experts. I hope he's not making a presentation, maybe just wanted to advertise. A company systems and cities expert. So members, thank you very much for those interactions. I keep saying this is an ongoing conversation. We have longed for NaMATA in this training workshop, because it is a training workshop, to allow us to interact with their own designs, what they have adapted, what has been challenging, but that will not happen because the engineer fell ill, which is really unfortunate. We'll take a 10-minute break, after which I will invite the Cairo presentation. So it's 15:53. Let's convene after 10 minutes. And thank you very much, all of you, for your contribution to this discussion. So welcome back. I hope you've enjoyed a cup of water if you're in hot Nairobi, some coffee if you're somewhere else where it's cold, and some chai. And I'm still recovering from the engagement by James Maina trying to update us on where NaMATA is at. And I hope that this conversation can continue around NaMATA. So if you have any other issues for NaMATA, we'll pack them for now so that we invite our colleagues from Cairo. It's good to hear what another region is doing for inspiration, for learning, for correction, because sometimes you can be stuck in your own little problem. And so I want to invite Noor from ITDP Cairo to take us through the presentation, after which we'll have some question and answer session. Welcome, Noor.
Hi, Rahab, how are you doing and how is everyone doing? So shall I start?
Sorry, I think you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
We can get
Please
you.
unmute.
We can hear you. She's okay. We can hear her.
Yes, Noor, can you go ahead? We can hear you.
Okay, fine. So let me start by sharing my screen. I hope we have solved this technical issue. Okay, so I hope you can see my screen right now. So hi everyone, I'm Noor Deeb, ITDP's country manager, and I'm based in Cairo, and I'm happy to be joining the workshop, the BRT design workshop today with you, where I'm going to give you an overview of the Cairo BRT designs and the steps that we have gone through. So to give you an update about Cairo, we're a city where it has a population of 19 million. As you can see from the pictures here, this is how the streets looks like during traffic congestion and the peak hour, which I'm sure many of you can relate in your respective cities. And of course, that effectively affect us negatively in a way where you spend too much time in public transportation or in cars. Also, it affects your productivity because you're not able to do many activities in one day, and you're not able to be efficient enough because, of course, you're tired by the end of the day by spending too long hours in traffic jams. And of course, not to mention the pollution aspects of it. So public transportation in Cairo, we do have a mode share where 70% depends on public transportation, including the metro. And 21% depends on cars, and the rest of the percentages are for other modes. So we have 80 kilometers of metro network. These are a few types of the public transport cars that we have. And we also have others that are 9 seats and 7 seats. So the challenges with the current public transport system is that, as you can see, it's overcrowdedness. There's no proper stations, so there's no orderly boardings and alightings, and also the bus terminals are not in order at all. So this is from where we started thinking that we need another decent public transport system, a rapid transit system where it can be more reliable and fast and convenient for the users. So for Cairo, when we start thinking about the design of the BRT corridor, we created at first a master plan where we looked at all of the mass rapid transit modes that we have. So in Cairo, we have currently 3 existing metro lines, which are shown in red, and we're expecting to have a 4th line shown in orange. Also, we do have currently under construction are 2 monorail lines, one connecting between Cairo to east of Cairo and Cairo to west of Cairo, which is 6th of October City. And from there, we have also looked at all of the public transport network, where they move and where can we best have our BRT corridor. So as you can see, we do have This is our final BRT corridor, which connects central Cairo to the west of Cairo, 6th of October city. Initially, we had another BRT corridor in the eastern side, but based on the authorities' decision, we were requested to proceed with the western side of Cairo first. So when we also look about creating a master plan, we think of the RTR ratio of the city. So the rapid transit ratio, it assesses like how many kilometers of mass rapid transit you have in a city in respect to the population in million. And we were aiming to increase the RTR to 19 for year 2033 for Cairo. So this is our final BRT corridor. It's a 41.5 kilometers corridor. It has 34 stations. There are 2 terminals that are located at the start or the end of the corridor, and another terminal located at the end where the depot is placed. So what is the current status of that project? In fact, for now, we have submitted the tender documents and the construction RFP for an authority called NUCA, which is an authority that is operating beneath the Ministry of Housing. And the Ministry of Housing is going to be the one funding the construction of the BRT project. Also, this project is in partnership with UN Habitat. And the implementation period of the project is, like the plan for the authority is that they're going to tender out the construction RFPs by end of 2021, by Q3 hopefully. And then construction shall start 2022, and hopefully the BRT operations would be in 2024. This project is like the expected cost of the project is around 3 billion EGP, which is around $200 million for the full corridor, including the stations and the civil works, which I'm going to discuss later on, and of course the terminals and the depot. So we have went through different steps in order to come out with the designs, the detailed designs, the specifications, and also the RFPs for that project. So first we started by mapping out the existing public transport routes. And from there, we have gone through the corridor identification, the service plan, infrastructure design, and this is where I'm going to focus my presentation on, and then also highlight a few things about the financial model and the business and institutional model that we have developed. So from the data collected, we were able to get valuable information such as the available right-of-way on different corridors, the public transport speeds that are currently operating, the volumes on each corridor, and also the number of boardings and alightings. And of course, all of that info had helped us in informing the service plan, and that was the outcome of it. So for the Cairo BRT corridor, we're expected to have 126,000 daily boardings with a bus speed of around 20 to 35 kilometers per hour in respect to current public transport speeds of 5 to 10 kilometers per hour. And we'll be requiring a fleet size of 119 articulated buses. So as you can see in those images, there are 4 different services that will be operating on that corridor. A few of them are express, where they do not stop at all stations, and few of them are regular services. And you can see here the different number of lines with how many stations they stop at. So from the service plan, we were able to know like how many stations do we require? Where shall we place those stations depending on the numbers of boardings and alightings in each location? Also, what should be the size of that station? So service plan is a very important and a key step in order to form your infrastructure design and be sure that you're creating the correct design for the correct demand. So to focus on that area, here I'm showing you like a street cross section. And let's focus on the street layout in general. So as you can see, we have the BRT station, it's about 6 meters, and we do have our BRT stations, they range between 4 to 6 meters, depending on the right-of-way of the street. Also, we have 6.5 meters for the bus lanes. So we have a passing lane and a stopping lane. and then a separator, and then there was 9 meters for mixed traffic, another separator, a bike lane, and then a minimum of 3 meters of the sidewalk. So for that, as you can see here, this is they were also another design criteria that were taken into consideration, such as you can see here, this is a bi-directional station. It has at-grade pedestrian crossings, and for the at-grade crossings, we do have traffic signals, so it's all signalized. And if it's a highway, we do have pedestrian bridges. As you can see, the station is with 2 platforms per direction due to the high demand there. And we, of course, have used the central median for the stations. And as you can see, this is a cross-section at AA here. So it eliminates the service roads on narrow streets, or we're at areas where you have a station. So let's look at different section of the street. So this is at section BB. As you can see, there is no station there, just the passing or the BRT lanes. And as you can see, we have added parking because there was space for it. And also we have maintained a median of the 5.5 meters, which was based on the authorities' request to maintain the median that they have created. So as you can see, depending on the right of way that you have and depending on different criteria, you can design the street in a different way. So let's move on to the station typologies. So for the stations, for that corridor, we almost had around 13 types of stations, but I would say there are mainly 6 and the others are derivatives depending on the right of way and depending on many other factors. So we do have bidirectional stations with pedestrian bridges, bidirectional add grade, and also staggered with pedestrian bridges and staggered add grade. And then we have the number of platforms varies, but the maximum number of platforms in our corridor is 2 platforms per direction. So let's take one station and look at it in depth. So this is an add grade station with 2 platforms per direction. As you can see, it starts with an access ramp around 15 meters, then the ticketing area is around another 10 meters. Our platform is 20 meters, which accommodates an articulated bus of 18 meters, and it actually can be it could actually also be 25 meters if you want to be more flexible. Then the connection. From the elevation view, we can see that this is a kind of an elevated station because our buses are high floor buses, and I'm going to provide a further detail about this in my coming slides. So these are a few renders for the station entrance. As you can see, this is a ramp where we have done a ramp here in order to ensure there is ease of accessibility for people with disabilities. And then in the station interior, after you pass the ticketing area, you go through the turnstiles where you can see there is a seating area, and also there is screens for passenger information system. And this is how the station view looks like from outside, where it was inspired from the Grand Egyptian Museum designs. So looking at another station with pedestrian bridge, we can see here, this is a staggered station. As I said, the pedestrian bridge, we placed it at areas where we cannot have traffic signals due to high speeds of the cars there. So to access the station, actually you need to get into the pedestrian bridge because the ticketing area is elevated on the 2nd floor. So this is the only way where you can access the BRT station and ensure that pedestrians will use it in order to pass. So for the station bus interface, first of all, I would like to show you here that we have used a ceiling that in order to provide shade for the passengers. Also, there is a platform extension of around 200 millimeters in order to provide a safe distance between the bus and the station. And also we had rollers there in order to avoid friction. The most important point here is that the platform and the bus floor are at the same level. So we have actually designed our station to be at an elevated platform of 900 mm. And also so it could match with the high floor buses. So these are the kind of the buses that we're using for our system. As you can see, they are articulated buses that could take up to 140 passengers. We have 4 left doors, and also we're thinking of having right doors probably for feeder services. This is still under study. For the emission technology, it's 03 or superior, and they're air-conditioned buses. So this is one of the high demand streets and one of the busy streets on the corridor. It's called Faisal Street. As you can see here, we found there is a huge need for a public transport system because, for instance, you could see here there's a line of different minibuses, microbuses that are moving, where we thought that they need to have a dedicated bus lane so people can move faster. And also you can see here that people are crossing disorderly, which of course is not safe for pedestrians, neither creates a risk for the people driving or even the bus drivers. So after here, you can see that there is a render where we have enlarged the sidewalks where possible. We have created a pedestrian, a tabletop crossings for people to pass safely. And as you can see, it's signalized. Also, since this street is a very busy street and there is lots of people crossing, we created a fence so people would not jump into the BRT corridor along the way, and only opened it for at the entrances of the stations so we can manage the flow. Then you can see here that there is the access ramp and people can get into the station easily with the off-board fare collection option. So getting into the intersection designs, we do have for this corridor 7 civil works, which 5 of them are bridges and 2 of them are tunnels. So I wanted here to take one of the examples, for instance, where we have a bridge here. I wanted to show you the different alternatives where we had for that intersection. So as you can see here, we have the BRT corridor coming from north and then it's getting into the west side. So we needed to think of possible ways of how it's going to cross. So this is the current flow of the cars, and we provided 2 alternatives. The first one was having the BRT cross at grade. So as you can see, we're going to have a traffic signal here because it's going to conflict with several traffic flow directions. And the other option was having the BRT with an exclusive flyover for it. And of course, that is this option was better, first of all, because due to the traffic counts that we have done there, it reduces the travel time for the BRT, and also it eases the traffic flow for the cars. And also, when we think about how to solve an intersection, we don't, of course, think only about the BRT. But as you can see here, we have also opened the right turn for the cars coming from the north to the east direction. Like if we saw in that slide, you can see that that direction was not allowed, but instead people would go to the west, do a U-turn, and then come back on the 26th of July corridor. So when you think of an intersection design, you have to think of all the modes that are operating. And this was a feasible option, the add grade, and it has its pros and cons. And of course, the flyover has its pros and cons. But it was the authority's decision at the end. And of course, there were many factors that affected that decision. And both, whether flyover or add grade, we opened that direction because the traffic counts were very high going from north to east. So another civil work that we had, which is one of our biggest civil works, is that, as you can see, this is again Faisal, and we wanted to create a terminal there so the BRT could reach. So as you can see already, there are a few bridges in gray existing there. So in our designs, we created or we designed a BRT exclusive bridge, which is shown here in purple. So the BRT would get into the bridge and then would come here for a U-turn to get add grade to the one of the terminals, or it can continue to a BRT, another BRT terminal here. So this Giza Square terminal, there is an already existing paratransit terminal there. it's organized, but not properly organized. So that's why it's like a hub for public transport users, for transfers, for everything. So it was a perfect idea to locate our terminal there. It's a 2-floor terminal. Just these two pictures are superimposed, where the BRT has the top floor with 7 substops, and also there is the ground floor. It's for the feeders. And of course, to access the BRT bus system, people will have to get the tickets from the ground floor. And it accommodates up to 17 feeder buses at a time. This is also another render for our industrial road depot, which is located on the western side of the corridor. It accommodates up to 150 articulated buses. It has a maintenance workshop. It also has the administration and the other facilities the buses would require. Getting into the financial model. So this corridor is going to be subsidized by the government. It's a public transport system, and it would require a subsidy. And the way it works is that there is going to be a separate fare collection entity. And also there is a trust fund where it receives subsidy from the government. It collects the fare collection and start giving the remuneration to the different operators. For the business and institutional model, we have actually, there is what is going to be a BRT agency, but of course it did not exist before. So under a ministerial decree, there was a decree that came out in 2018, where it says that we need to have an agency for public transportation. And we have actually created that agency to be able to take care of the BRT and build capacity of how they should operate the BRT later on. So the BRT agency actually is going to be responsible for different contracts, the bus operating contract as one, the fare collection and ITS contract as another, like 2-in-1 contracts, the trust fund, and also will be managing the contracts for the station and maintenance. So all in all, these were the steps that we had gone through in order to have the BRT designed, and hopefully, I really hope that the construction would start on time on 2022. And thank you all.
Wow, very, very articulate, very clear, very comprehensive. Thank you, Noor, and we look forward to 2024. You say that's when the corridor will be complete?
Yes, of course, that's when it should start operations, yeah.
The renderings will just be turned into reality. I'm excited. You know, I want to just start by appreciating that your government is fully in control. You kept repeating that the authorities said we cannot do that here. The authorities advised that the buses should pass here. The government is going to give a subsidy. Very focused leadership. And that's very impressive for planning. I also like the fact that in your BRT designs, you're very clear on the bus technology, very clear on the designs, the stations, location of the depot. I mean, this just seems to be doing it by the book. How rich is your government in comparison to the rest of the sub-Saharan Africa? This is a question I'm throwing at you as we engage with other questions. Are you saying that this will be fully government funded? Thank you.
Thank you, Rahab, and thank you for showing interest. So, of course, the government involvement, it didn't come from one day. Okay, you need like several days to convince, first of all, the people with a new system like that. So let me take it step by step. Regarding how organized we are in our steps is because we started from scratch. We started from collecting data in 2018, where we had no updated data about public transportation. So starting from scratch somehow helped us know what exactly do we need next. And since we took full like the lead of the project, starting from the design phase, all the way till having the BOQs, the specs, and also the RFPs for the operator, for the ITS, for the construction, it all helped us like throughout the way of creating all of that process. Of course, there was a huge government involvement, and we were very keen to involve them from day one in every step that we take. And that's, I guess, it's a very important note. Regarding the subsidies, of course, when you come to our government, I wouldn't say it's a very rich government. And of course, when we told them about the project in the beginning, the idea of subsidy was an issue, because the subsidies, like, you know, the ticket fares, we want to create like a reasonable price for the tickets, because at the end of the day, it's for the normal person, a public transport user who pays like 5 EGP pounds in one mode. So we don't want to create a BRT system that is very expensive for him. So in order to achieve that, the government, of course, has to subsidize a system, and it has to see the benefits of having that system to be put in construction. So, so the government is just responsible for the construction of the BRT corridor, including the stations, the terminals, and the depot, and the civil works. But for instance, for the purchase of the buses, it's going to be on the operator side, and we have studied several scenarios for that, and that's what became the best solution is. Also, creating that BRT agency, I would say it was a challenge in the beginning, because nothing like that existed. Like, there is a public transport agency, but it's like responsible for a more citywide transportation. But what we're doing here is that because we're connecting a new city to central Cairo, what actually helped us here is that the new city has like somehow its own governmental authority. So this is where we thought, and they're very active, and this is where we thought, okay, we should place the BRT agency there. And we built capacity. We hired a manager, we hired engineers that could know what this sustainable transport means, how this system will be effective for them. So all of that, we're taking like baby steps to achieve a big step afterwards. I would say that for current investment, of course, or the government is currently studying different options for funding, like taking loans from banks. And this is, of course, an area that is being studied by the government to see how they could finance such system.
Thank you. I asked that to start us off, and I'd like to ask one more before I throw it out to the rest of us. In terms of the institutional framework, you say that the Ministry of Housing is the umbrella ministry. Do you have a Ministry of Transport? Do you have a decentralized city government? Yes, you talked of a new city. Do you have road agencies? And how do you bring all these people together?
Okay, so, you know, bringing those people together is the toughest part. And yes, as you can see, we do have a Ministry of Transport. However, this project, when we first started it, we went to the Ministry of Transport to pitch for that project, and unfortunately, they did not have the capacity to start working on that project and start the implementation process for it. So what made us go to the Ministry of Housing is because the corridor, it connects between a new city, and all new cities are being governed by the Ministry of Housing, including their water, sanitization, transport systems, everything. But the Ministry of Transport is looking at the governorates like Cairo and Giza, and they do have, there's an authority called CTA, Cairo Transport Authority, where it's responsible for all of the intercity buses, for the buses that are operating inside the governorates like Cairo and Giza. They do have some buses that goes between like Cairo and outer cities, but not much. Like for instance, for all the new cities, you wouldn't find the Ministry of Transport is playing a huge role there, because the Ministry of Housing is taking care of it, of all of the new cities that emerge. So that's why we went to the Ministry of Housing and pitched them that project. But of course, when you talk to the Ministry of Housing, of course, a city like Cairo is still under the Ministry of Housing. So we tried to create that connection. So in fact, one of the challenges that we have is that this long corridor, I would say, it passes by 3 different restrictions. So you have to go to the 6th of October authority. You have to talk to the Giza governorate, and also you have to talk to another transport agency that is responsible also for one of the stretches, because it's somehow related to the military. So what we have done is that we involved those 3 entities because they did not speak to each other in the beginning. So that was kind of our role in how we could let them see each other. And towards actually the end of that project, the Ministry of Transport has came to us and they asked us that they want to create another BRT corridor, because now they saw the need for it and the importance of it. And now, like, we're discussing with them a second BRT corridor, which will be under the Ministry of Transport, in fact. I hope that answered your question and did not confuse you more.
No, it helped to understand the journey that you have taken. And like I said, that presentation was very clear. We have a lot of interactions on the chat. I don't know if you want to read directly, but let me read the ones directed to me so that we don't miss them out. Very nice Cairo presentation. Did you study an option to save the median trees with central counterflow bus lanes? So if you could answer that, then you could answer the general ones. I think, did you understand?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So for the median, in fact, there are many of the corridors that we're having the BRT corridor located at. Sometimes we're maintaining the median because we want to maintain the trees that are there. And if you saw the presentation, the cross section that I actually chose was maintaining the median. There are very narrow streets that we have on the corridor. We were not actually being able to maintain that median because we had to create like the BRT lanes in the center. And I'm not sure what you mean by center contraflow bus lanes, but there is 1 lane per direction for each bus, and you have the station. So like a very narrow stretch that we have is called Faisal. And for this stretch, we have all of the stations there are staggered stations because we couldn't have bi-directional station due to the right-of-way constraint. And in the median, this is where we had to remove the median because we wanted to create just a 1 lane per direction for the buses.
Thank you. Please go ahead with the rest of the questions on the chat, or do you want me to read them out for you, or you can just do it direct?
It's okay. Maybe I can get into some questions. Yes, about the spending of the project, yes, it's around $200 million in order to be spent on the corridor construction and the civil works. And from what I learned from other cities is that construction here is not very expensive compared to other African cities. So yes, it's going to be around $200 million, let's say, maybe plus or minus.
And you're going to use the asphalt? It's not bitumen?
Okay, so what we're doing is that because in most of the stretches we're using the existing streets where we're just having one lane that is being taken for the BRT. So we're going to have asphalt layers for the BRT lanes, but only at stations we're going to have them as concrete, because there is too much stopping there, and of course that's not helpful for the buses, and it's going to wear the asphalt faster than it should be. I guess you can choose the questions I can answer, because it's a bit hard to follow up on them. So about having direct services, so we're currently studying about having the trunk feeders and the trunk services and feeder services. So now we're in the process of having another paratransit study, or like another service planning study, where it shows where are we going to place the existing bus operators that are operating on the same BRT corridor. We have also created on that same corridor we created several feeder terminals. So the current operators would just reroute out of the BRT corridor, but have their own space for parking and where they can get passengers into the BRT system. So it's a win-win situation for all. There's a question about when I say we, I'm talking from ITDP. So like this project is a partnership with UN Habitat, and they're doing that project with the Ministry of Housing, where the government entity that is financing the project. There's another question about who's buying the bus fleet, and yes, the operator will be buying the bus fleet, and we do have 119 articulated buses that is required for that corridor. Do you see other questions coming from your side?
How will you be able to tell the level of subsidies that government should give for the BRT? That's a question.
Okay, so for that, I would also like to mention a very important partner that we have worked with, which is Logit. Logit is a company based in Brazil, where they are design consultants, and they have done worked on lots of BRT projects. So they were the ones who actually assisted us in the concept designs for the BRT corridor, and they have also done a very thorough financial model for the BRT, where they assessed the level of subsidies that would be required for the system. And of course, there were many factors to get in order to know how much subsidy would you require. So there is factors like the number of daily boardings that you would have, the fare box revenue. Also, we took into consideration, of course, there are the capital costs that would be required, that's on a side. Also, the payment that would be required for the bus operators, for the trust fund manager operator, the ITS, the operation, the maintenance and the cleanliness of the stations. So there were many factors that have actually assessed the level of subsidies that would be required, and also it depends on the contract period of each of those operators as well.
Okay, you said that you're not having direct services, and I think it's the authorities that guided this. But the person is saying that, please mute. The person is saying, if you had direct, if you had, wait, 126,000 boardings per day is good, but ridership could have been increased significantly through the introduction of direct services, justifying the project even more and improving financial sustainability, in bracket, higher fare revenues. So the person wants to know why your government is not taking on direct services.
So no, it's not that we're not taking it, but it's actually still under study. So we're studying the possibility of having direct services and feeder services into the system. So like till now we have reached to a situation, or we're just having the trunk services where I showed you, but as I'm speaking, we're currently working on checking the options of direct services as well. It's
another technical question. Why are you selecting median stations instead of split stations with 2 lanes in the medium?
So you mean, for instance, why are we selecting a station with 2 substops per direction instead of splitting a station? So in fact, one of the corridors, we had the stations being split, but it ended up having a very long station because and very long interruptions across the corridor. So we had to avoid splitting stations, and because also there were lots of intersections coming across or along the BRT corridor, like perpendicular intersections where it has to be treated. So we previously had a design of a split stations. It could be possible in some of the designs, depending on the kind of road that you have and the traffic flow that you have there. But for instance, due to right-of-way constraints, we were not able to have split stations in some of the roads. So that's why we had a station with 2 substops. And also sometimes, you know, split stations, it's really creates a very long interruption across the corridor. And I'm saying interruption because sometimes for the government, having any project there other than what is being on ground is an interruption. So that's why.
Did you appraise the ridership with a cube modeling or some other method? What about TOD revenues?
Okay, so in fact, my background in modeling is not very strong, so I'm not sure about what do you mean by cube modeling. But for instance, our colleague Rami that was just speaking earlier today is the one that he used the ME model in order to calculate the ridership and the demand required for that project. So for TOD revenues, I mean, TOD, it's a great initiative, and also this is what we're studying the principles of it to see how it could complement the BRT systems. For other kind of revenues, like for instance, we do have one of the terminals, the Giza terminal. As I said, it's already a 2-floor terminals, one for BRT and one for microbuses. And we were telling the government if they wanted to have like multi-story building where they can have commercial activities. For instance, in China, you can see that they do have a mall there, and at the ground level of the mall, they do have a BRT terminal. So this is, for instance, a mean where you can generate revenue. Also, a very small stream of revenue could come from marketing on the BRT buses or marketing inside stations, but I wouldn't consider advertising. When we studied it, we studied advertising, but it didn't generate a huge stream of revenue where you actually need. So I guess maybe creating
Orange
community
paper bag,
spaces,
sorry, on the chair.
such as at the terminals would be
Not for
an option.
Okay, there is a suggestion. What about some financing based on the percentage of employees' salaries, like it happens in France?
So the case in France is that how is the model works?
I think we'd need to give Olivia a minute to explain how the model works, because I also don't know very much about it.
Oh, thank you, Noor. It works like some of the financing is coming straight from companies' pocket. Based on the salaries, they take 5% of the full amount of salaries and give it to the system, to the people that are operating the BRT buses or so any kind of transport system. So
Okay.
it's financed by the private sector.
Okay, so like it's mandatory to take part of the salaries of all employees working, and then you place it like in a national project like that? Is that the idea?
Exactly. It works like this way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, you know, we have a percentage of taxes that is being, of course, taken on your salary. So I guess like the government would take part of those kind of taxations, and probably this is from where they're going to fund other national projects. But it's a good suggestion. But I feel that you need the employees to agree, or maybe you should make a kind of a platform or a forum where this is actually needed. But it's a good idea because people would see the importance of having a decent public transport and how they can actually like help with financing it. That's a good option as well.
Yeah, I've never heard of that option, but if we can work around giving the confidence and trust to operators and the employees, maybe it can work in our part of the world. Thank you, Noor. How will you finance BRT? I think we've covered that. There's a subsidy from government. How are you working with other local governments mandated with land use planning?
Okay, so for the land use planning, what we have done at first, when we chose about having the BRT corridor in such area, of course we they communicated with the authorities in advance to know what are other projects that might be in the pipeline before we start working on the BRT. Because, for instance, one of the reasons, for instance, that we went in Giza on the north side, but not on the south side, because the south side of it, there was already a metro line that is going to be constructed. So we didn't want to have two modes operating on the same line, especially that north and south are not very far from each other. Like I would say they're maybe around 5-10 kilometers apart. And also, the construction was to be very difficult if you had an underground metro, and especially that the right of way is really constrained there. So of course, before starting on choosing our corridor, and that came in the corridor identification phase, we connected with the different authorities that we will planning to have the BRT corridor constructed there. And we knew about the national projects that were going to happen, what is their land use planning. And based on that, we came with our final BRT corridor. And yeah, this is how we chose it. So again, it's organization and communication with entities in advance before you just come up with a line showing a BRT corridor and tell them that's what I have to give. So proper coordination, I would say.
Thank you. Under pressure to finish by 5, and I looked through the chat. I think you've answered almost all the questions very well. So I want to thank you very much, Noor. I don't know if you'll join us tomorrow so that we can engage you a bit more on the journey that Cairo is taking on BRT planning. That would be nice if you have some time so that we ask you more questions, because your process seems to be working very well. You know, it's just almost a textbook case study, which is excellent. It happens. And I don't see why it should not happen in other cities. So thank you very much. Members, it's been a very engaging afternoon. I think in my mind, I'm left to mentally compare what we are doing in Nairobi against what a place like Cairo is doing. And I have my questions. I think there's a lot of learning for our NaMATA counterparts, which was the essence of this session. I look forward to the day when NaMATA will give us a clear presentation, a technical one. This is what we are doing here. This is why the lane has to pass here and not there. This is what it will cost, just as part of information sharing and the participation that one of the participants talked about. That will be great. We look forward to that day. And I don't want to do wrap-ups. Wrap-ups can be very tiring on an afternoon. I want to believe that we'll join up together tomorrow morning so that we finish this good job that we have begun. But with the next 6 minutes, I just want you to raise your hand if you must speak and you have not spoken before. That's the space I have, ladies and gentlemen. Kevin Parker, you have the floor.
Thank you, Rahab. Now I raised, I noted on the chat about planning, including all persons with limited mobility and in vulnerable situations. Every time you listen to planning gurus, they're always talking about persons with disabilities. And when they talk about persons with disabilities, they are talking about ramps and such. So basically, they are referring to wheelchair users. And there are many people who are in vulnerable situations, and I noted them, like expectant mothers, sick persons, the elderly, and then disability is categorized. So what about the people who have hearing impairments and visual impairments? So all that is supposed to be taken into consideration, and not just ramps and yeah. So you should always remember that there are very many persons who are in vulnerable situations. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. You're right. Sometimes we tend to ignore those people. We had a workshop on people-centered mobility and had representation from the blind, the deaf, and many others. And they did actually bring in some of the requirements and some of the frustration that they have using public transport. And we hope that planners and engineers will take some of those recommendations on board. From UN Habitat, we've already made our suggestions, but obviously if you have any specific guidance on this issue, kindly feel free to contact ITDP or NaMATA so that we make sure that they're well represented. Any other person? I have 3 minutes. Or even give a vote of thanks to Noor and Maina. I don't see another hand, and I don't want to push it beyond 5 p.m. so that I have the people back tomorrow morning. We begin at 9. Is it, Carol?
We begin at 10.
At 10. So
yeah, let me just share the program.
We begin at 10 o'clock tomorrow. And it seems we've been packing this question of TOD, land value capture, leaving it for tomorrow. We hope to also listen to more case studies. I get very inspired by case studies. We hope to listen to Kigali and Dar es Salaam. I met Noor in Dar es Salaam when she was just beginning, and you can see what she has done after our study tour. So here comes Friday at 10. We'll look at the public transport reforms, industry transition and business modeling. Engineer Jerry will take us through that. I notice in Noor's presentation, she didn't talk much about the existing industry. Maybe that's not an issue in Egypt. We'll have a case study by Engineer Ronald Lokatare, CEO DAT, and we'll have a case study from Kigali. And then we'll have a session to hear the voice of public transport reforms in Nairobi by the operators themselves. I'm looking forward to that. And then we'll have a session on TOD, like I've been advertising, and a closing session by a representative of government. So that's our program for tomorrow. I look forward to seeing each one of you. Invite others who need to be sensitized on public transport planning, focusing on BRT. And thank you very much for your active participation. So unless there's any other urgent announcement, I think I come to the end, and it was a pleasure moderating the sessions. Thank you. And thank you for appreciating the
Rahab.
sessions.
See you tomorrow.
See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.